So Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, for the last few days, an odd and disturbing claim has been going around social media. The claim is that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a piece of legislation that requires Florida's university students and professors to register their political beliefs and or their political affiliation, R or D, with the state. Now, that would be a terrible idea and a gross violation of the First Amendment. The government has no business demanding that people announce their political views, and in fact, it's prevented from doing so by the Bill of Rights. Thankfully, the claim is entirely false. Ron DeSantis signed no such bill. Now, the claim has been appearing all over Twitter. Author Stephen King, a noted liberal Democrat, shared the rumor here. And then there was Grant Stern, who's an editor of Occupy Democrats, and also Claire McCaskill, the former Democratic senator from Missouri and a current MSNBC contributor. Now, both those latter two tweets by McCaskill and the Occupy Democrats editor, those two linked to an article that appeared in Salon magazine that was titled, "DeSantis Signs Bill Requiring Florida Students, Professors to Register Political Views with the State." But that article is actually a year old. It's from June 23rd, 2021. And it was debunked a year ago by PolitiFact. PolitiFact is an independent fact-checking organization. I've actually criticized some of its fact checks in the past because I think it occasionally, maybe more than occasionally, manifests a liberal bias. So if even PolitiFact says the claim is false, well, it's probably false. And in fact, that's exactly what PolitiFact says. The bill in question, HB 233, which DeSantis signed a year ago, calls for the creation of an academic survey that university students and professors can voluntarily participate in. That survey will ask members of campuses to give their views on the climate for intellectual diversity and viewpoint diversity at the school. The intention is that if there's too much political bias, there are examples of students being mistreated due to their political views, well, they could speak up vis-a-vis this survey. No one, I repeat, no one, will have to register their political beliefs or their political affiliation with the state of Florida as a result of this legislation. Now, what's been going around on Twitter is simply false. It's a false claim, and an outdated one at that. It's a year old. But this has not stopped members of the mainstream media, including Washington Post columnist Max Boot, from citing the claim as evidence that, quote, DeSantis is engaged in one of the most alarming assaults on free speech and academic freedom since the dark days of McCarthyism in the 1950s. Are there no editorial standards at the Washington Post anymore? Do Post writers feel wholly unconstrained by basic facts like, is this claim old and debunked? I guess not. It's obvious that the mainstream media will align with Democrats and go after DeSantis, who is rapidly becoming a de facto frontrunner for the 2024 Republican nomination, displacing, I think, former President Trump. So perhaps the MSM has gotten lazy because finding things to criticize about Trump was comparatively easy. Because some of the hits on DeSantis have been rather pathetic. Remember when 60 Minutes falsely claimed that Florida giving a vaccination contract to Publix was unethical and DeSantis was behind it? That was another weak hit, weak sauce, I might say. So is this one. It's fair to criticize DeSantis for the things he's actually doing that are ill-considered. And in fact, I've done so on the show. I've knocked his efforts to control the curriculum in the schools. I've criticized the so-called Don't Say Gay bill because it's, in my opinion, overbroad and badly worded. HB 233, on the other hand, was signed into law over a year ago and simply doesn't do what Democrats and the media, and I guess Stephen King, told you it does. So this was reappearing on my feed all week, and I was going, why are people talking about this? Was there a new bill he signed? Because this was like from a year ago. Yeah. And it's just not, like, PolitiFact looked at it. Yeah. Like, you can, I guess you can object if you want to think, you can think this is not something that should be done at all. The point is that, you know, conservatives are concerned about bias and political intolerance on college campuses, you know, cancel culture, that kind of stuff. And one way of dealing with it is to just begin by surveying it to see to the extent it's real. So this only calls for a survey where, you know, if you feel that you can't express your views or that the climate of the campus is hostile to you, you can participate in the survey. It does not call for any kind of like registry of who is voting for whom or that kind of thing. It's been debunked. Totally debunked. But then this week, it was just, again and again and again, people were talking about it. Claire McCaskill, Stephen King, those were just like prominent examples, but it was everywhere. Like, where's the new, what did DeSantis do now? It didn't do anything. It's a year ago. Like I don't think people kept checking that Salon article they were sharing.
Yeah.
It's June of 2021.
Well, you know, people don't read most articles. They just share them.
Yeah.
Retweet them. I mean, that's just the truth on both sides, everybody.
Yeah.
People respond to headlines, they retweet things, they share things, and they're not actually reading or engaging with it substantively, so that doesn't surprise me.
But do you think the media has gotten lazy because that last point I made, because it's so easy to mock Trump because he's kind of a ridiculous person and he says really embarrassing things? A lot of not all of the criticism of DeSantis, because I share some of it, but a lot of it has just seemed incredibly like the media's out of practice or something at going after a prominent Republican. What do you think?
Listen, I don't know if I would say the media got lazy. I'm not unreasonable. Misinformation is misinformation. If that's not what the bill is or what the bill does, I'm not going to dig my heels in on a non-existent point, right? I think there are a lot of legitimate criticisms to be had of DeSantis. Like I said, I think the culture war thing is nonsense. I think it is a Republican recharacterization of bigotry. I think his "Don't Say Gay" bill is ridiculous and discriminatory. I think what he's doing in terms of Disney, I think what he's doing in terms of history, the schools, I think he's doing a significant amount of things that are incredibly problematic for marginalized communities. That being said, I will concede to you here, like, if that's not what it is, that's not what it is. And I think that's just the reality of the climate and the time that we live in. People on both sides share information. No one's particularly looking into it. The average person is a consumer, you know, and they didn't scrutinize it. So I think it's always worthwhile to point out misinformation when you find it. I have no objection to that, Robby.
But these people will be some of the loudest, and by these people, I mean these people in the media, kinds of people who spread this sort of thing will be the first to call for stronger policing of misinformation. I'm like, look at the misinformation we're spreading.
I might agree in a world where the party we're talking about literally isn't going on and on about an election rigging that didn't happen, can't concede the fact that they lost an election. DeSantis himself has gone about passing laws to address what is a pretty rare election fraud claim in order to continue speaking to and stoking right-wing nonsense. So I have to be fair. I don't think the criticism can be made of Democrats without recognizing how deeply, deeply Republicans are committed to sharing and perpetuating misinformation to appease their base. But I agree with you here, Robby.
There's a lot of it. The sharing of misinformation, to my mind, just takes place in all corners.
Yeah, that's what I said.
It takes place in the mainstream.
I think that's
why we ought to be careful about efforts to purge it. We call it correct things that you think are wrong, but this whole, oh no, we have to make social media a safe space for
I don't think that
misinformation it's going to be this most fraught challenge.
And you know, I don't disagree with you in terms of I don't think our government should be having these kinds of roles, which is also why even the survey, I recognize that the law isn't what people thought it was, but I think the survey in and of itself is improper. I think it speaks to an imaginary claim and Republicans' need to paint themselves as the oppressed when they are quite frankly not. So I disagree with the survey and all of that, but I agree. I think, you know, if it's misinformation, it's misinformation. Call it out, Robby.
That's a topic for another day, but our panel is up next, and we'll talk about the left media's reaction to the rise of a so-called far-right Latina. Stay tuned.